If you're running a service business and still writing invoices by hand or entering the same data in multiple places, you're wasting hours every week. I'll show you how to build a simple invoice system with Airtable so you can spend more time growing your business and get paid faster. Check it out. Welcome back. I'm Zack from InnerDev Solutions. We help businesses streamline their processes using custom no-code tools so you can focus on what matters most. To learn more, you can visit our website, innerdevsolutions.com, or use the link in the description below. If you do not have an Airtable account already, you can create one for free. There is a link in the description below. Once you have an account, you can get started by creating a new base from scratch. There is an AI build option, but to learn the basics of Airtable and learn how to build this for yourself, it would be helpful to go through this manually. To get started, we can build out the tables that we need. In our case, we're focusing on service-based businesses. We're going to pick a plumbing company for an example. And as a plumbing business, we need to track different pieces of information to then be able to create our invoices. The very first table we're going to create is a clients or customers table, whatever you want to call it. When you create a new base, we have a table that gets set up for us automatically. First thing I like to do is just delete all these fields. I will add these in manually in a moment. What I can do in table one, we'll just click that drop down. You can double click it or you can right click, but I will just double click and rename this to customers and we'll hit save. And if you want, go ahead and start adding some of the fields that you would need on the customer level. And that's what I'm going to do. You can also go through and build out all the tables that you think you'll need based off of your planned data scheme as well. Obviously, we're going to need things like customers. In our case, we are going to track addresses and certain customer data right in the customers table rather than create its own separate table. But again, we're going to need customers. We'll need something like projects or jobs. We're going to need invoices and invoice line items, but we'll get into that. We're going to keep our customers table really simple. So we'll just do a single line text field. We'll just call this customer name. Again, you could separate this out into a first name, last name, but I'm just going to add in customer name for now. I'll add a phone field type. We'll add in an email field type, and we will of course need a job address field. Now we could separate this all out into a street, a city, postal code, the province or state, obviously, but we're just going to keep it really simple. We're just going to add in a long text field and we'll just call this address, and that's where we'll enter the entire address. And because it is likely or possible that you could have a customer with the same name, this primary key or primary field here on the leftmost side is important, and you should, best case or best practice is making that unique. There's a few ways to handle this, but in our case, just switch this to an auto number and we will just use that throughout our system. We'll just call this customer ID and it will automatically generate a unique number for each customer. Now we can create our jobs table. We can go up here, click start from scratch. We'll call this jobs and we will save this. Same thing. I'm going to delete all of these default fields I want. And what I can do is add in a few things. I'm going to bring in an auto number so that each job gets a unique ID. Just make this a little bit smaller here. We want to link this to our clients or our customers. There's a few ways of doing that. You can click this link to another record, or if you just start typing the table name customers, it should show up here for us. Link to customers, and we want to allow one job can only link to one customer. In our case, I will disable allow linking to multiple records, create that field. With linked records, it creates it on the flip side. If I go back into customers, look across to the far right, we can see it created a link to this jobs table. In this case, double click into it and we can see allow linking to multiple records. It is possible that a customer has multiple jobs, either one time or throughout the customer life cycle. We can leave that as is. Hit save, go back to jobs, and now we can add in the next step. Here, you could also change it up a little bit where I had mentioned maybe adding the job address. This could be a billing address or the customer address. It is possible that a customer has multiple addresses. Here is where we'll add in another long text field type, and this one we'll call job address. We'll just create that field. A couple other things that we're going to add in here. Maybe we will have a job type. So we could have something like repair, installation. Maybe you have a maintenance program or schedule. We could add all of these in as well, just for some additional internal data that we might want to keep track of. And a couple other things we're going to add in a service date. So that's a date type field. We'll just call service date. And you have an option to choose a few different styles. I'm just going to choose this friendly one and click create field. Last thing, depending on how you run your business, you may want to add a technician, employee, somebody who's actually going to look after this job. What's probably best when you're building a larger system is to create a separate table labeling it technicians or employees, and then you'll just link this to that technician, similar to the way that we're linking customers to jobs. Because we are trying to keep this simple and focus more on the invoice side of things, I'm just going to create a single select field. Actually, it's easy enough to change this to a linked record field later on, but we're just going to call this technician, or maybe technician assigned, and then we can add a few names here and we'll create field. Obviously, there's a lot more information that you can track on this jobs table. For example, we may want to add a notes field as well, but there could be plenty of other things. But we're just going to keep it really simple like this for this video. Last thing, again, we could add to this as being just the ID. I'm just going to take it one step further and just go in to here. We'll call this a job ID, and we'll use a formula field this time. And in this case, we can bring in the ID, and then we'll use an and symbol. We'll just separate it with a dash, another and symbol, and then we'll bring in the customer name, and we'll hit confirm. Now we're going to get into the invoicing piece. There is two components to this. We're going to have the invoices and then the invoice line items, and they link to each other. We're going to go in again, start from scratch. We'll call this invoice or invoices, and we'll hit save, delete all of these default fields, and now we can come in here and start our related fields. There's two things that we may want to add here, and one of them is going to be a customer, and we only want to allow an invoice to link to one customer, and we will add in a job as well. Same thing, allow linking to just one record or one job. Right here, we can call this invoice ID or invoice number, whatever you want, and we can create a formula, and we will build that out in a moment. Similar to the other two tables, we'll bring in an auto number, which will be our ID, and we'll use this in our invoice. For our invoice number, we're going to use some math here. We will go sum, and we will start our invoices at 1,000, and then we are just going to sum up the ID that it provides us as well. Basically, we're taking 1,000 plus whatever the ID is. So 1,000 plus 1, 1,000 plus 2, and that is going to give us our invoice number. So we can see the invoice number listed. A few more fields. We're going to add in an invoice date. Again, I'll change this to friend. We're going to add in a due date. You could actually add in a date field and manually select that. If you have standard terms where it's always 30 days, you could use a formula field, or you could use a drop down if you have different terms, 15, 30, or 45 days, whatever you want. We're going to keep it simple, and we're going to use a formula and just say all invoices are due within 30 days. We're going to add in a due date here. We'll type in date, and we'll be able to see the different functions that are available here. We're going to select date add, and now we're going to add in the invoice date and comma. We're going to use 30, and we're going to use days. On the left side, if I click on date add, we can see the function and the different arguments, parameters that are required. We're going to create this field showing an error because we don't have an invoice date. But one other thing I'm going to do is change the formatting to friendly. We'll save this. And if we add in September 1st, whatever 30 days is from there, shows October 1st. Again, I'll go back into the formatting. I'm just going to turn off. Worried about a few other fields we're going to add. We're going to add in a status field, which is just a single select. You can label it status, and we're going to add some options. We can go draft, sent, paid, and whatever else you want there to be. And by default, every invoice that we create is going to start off in the draft stage. Now, when I go click add, it will automatically add the invoice number for us based off of the ID and the calculation we have here. And the status, I'll drag that to the front, is now in draft. Depending on how you run your business, like I said, there's probably a chance you're going to be having line items on your invoice, not just going to have one amount and just send it out blindly. We do need to add another table. If for whatever reason you only need one amount, you're not worried about having line items on your invoices, you can click here, bring in a currency field, and then just add in the amount that the customer client owes you directly. But what we actually need to do here, we're going to change this field type, or actually we're just going to cancel it out for now. We'll come back and build it in a minute. Again, we'll create from scratch. We'll call this invoice items, and I will just type in line item here, and that's what we'll call the records. We'll save that. We'll delete all of these fields, and now we can link this to the invoice table. We will allow linking to just one invoice. In the invoices, it's now created the invoice items linked field for us. If I click into it, we will allow an invoice to have multiple line items, but we do not want to allow a line item to link to multiple invoices. That's why we have that turned off. I like bringing in the auto number and all of these. And actually, I'm going to delete this one here, and I'm just going to relabel this auto number, or sorry, change this field type to auto number. I will call this line item ID, and we'll just leave it like for now. We have our line item ID, we have our link to invoices, and now we can add in the other line item data. We're going to bring in a long text. We can just call this description. We'll bring in a currency. We'll use unit price. We're going to bring in a number field, and we'll call this quantity. And we can choose our decimal places here. I'm going to allow 2 decimal places on our quantity, just so that we can get a little more granular if we need to. We'll create that field. And the last thing that we're going to do is create another formula field, label it amount. And we're simply going to take the unit price and we're going to multiply it by the quantity and set the format as currency, and we can create. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go in and create some example data. We'll just call this Acme Co. I'm going to create some sample data. So I'm just going to put in my name as the customer. I'm not going to worry about phone number and email or really any of this other additional data for now. And we'll just go into a job. We'll create a job and link this to me as the customer. The job address, again, we won't really worry about. Maybe we'll set up repair here. We can add in the service date as today, and we won't worry about the technician assigned either. Now we can go into invoices. We can link a customer. We can link a job. And one thing I'm going to do to make it a little clearer, I'm actually going to change this customer ID. I'm going to insert, create a formula field. I'm just going to take the customer ID, and I'm just going to, similar to what we did in the invoices, separate it and add in the customer name as well. Create that field. I'm just going to right click on it, and there should be an option. Actually, I'm just going to drag it to the left, and we'll change the primary field. We can change this to just ID. So now when I go into invoices, I can see that the job and who the job is linked to. If I go back into invoice items, we will link all these line items to that invoice that we've just created here. If I go into invoice items, we can add a few things. Maybe we're going to add in copper pipe, and we'll just put in unit price. Depending on your business, how you want to set this all up, you're going to have to change some of these fields or add in additional fields to get more specific, because right now the unit price isn't really telling us too much about the price and the quantity. So you may want to add some additional fields or link it to a products table, or in the description even saying how many feet or what price is per foot or something along those lines here when it comes to the product side of things. But on the labor side, we can just call this labor. Maybe the unit price is $125 an hour, and they were there for 4 hours. And last thing, maybe they had to rent some sort of equipment. So we can just type in equipment rental and the unit price, maybe $75. And that was for 3 of the hours. We have our totals here. We have our unit price, we have our quantities, and our totals. Because these line items are all linked to this one record, the invoice record being 1001. If I go back into invoices, go back here and type in roll up, I can actually sum up all of those values. I'll click invoice items, and then I will select the amount. That is the field that we are looking at. Hit create here. You'll see the total amount of $875. If I go into invoice items and add up all of those, we can see it's $875 that is doing. I'm just looking at the invoice table, select roll up source, and then the field we want to roll up is amount, which is this one right here. This is how you set up a really simple invoicing system for your service-based business. Like I said, there's a lot more that you can do. There's additional tables that could be added, as I mentioned, whether it's the technicians table or a products table as well. You can get into building interfaces and automations. For example, with this invoices table, how to take it even further. If you use QuickBooks or Xero, you can integrate with those tools. So you can track all of your jobs and the information and the details and the amounts that you're going to be charging customers right here in a clean and simple interface. And you can push those to invoices in another system so that you can track. You can push this data to other systems so you're only entering it once. Now, there's this automations option as well. Now, one last thing I'm going to look at quickly is this interfaces. And once you have your tables built out, I would recommend going to interfaces and you can create a much cleaner view. Maybe try building with AI, but it doesn't hurt to go in and build something yourself. Quickly build an interface. I'll just skip through some of these things and I will just go into this record review to keep it really simple. Next, I'll just show you what it could look like to build an invoices interface using Airtable. I'll just click next, add in all of these fields, and I'll click next. We'll just call this invoices. And now we can see here that we've got all of the different fields that exist in the invoices table. One thing I'm going to do, this invoice number, because it's showing here, I'm going to hide this one. I don't need that. We can just click remove. Status. If I click this whole box, I'm just going to add in this show background color. And again, there are all sorts of properties and settings on the right side here when you click into different elements. This one I want to make editable. Actually, I'm just going to click this whole group and we're going to make all of it editable. One thing I am going to do, I'm going to change this to a view type, which is a list view type. And now it makes it a little bit easier to manage and see all of the different line items that are associated with this invoice. I may want to bring in the quantity, unit price, and I'll bring in the amount as well. If I just resize some of these fields, you can see all of the information in line here. And now, because I'm selected in here, I can edit records in line, and we can even add and delete records in a line as well. One thing, I am going to remove the line item ID. That isn't as important. Now, if I scroll up, we can see that we have the status, we have the different customers that we can select and add in here. This ID, I'm going to remove it as well. It's not that important. Due date is automatically calculated based off of 30 days after September 1st. And then this shows us our total value. This would be our invoice amount. And we can just rename this label here to keep it a little cleaner. If I click this preview, we can see we have different invoices set up. And when I'm in this one, I can go in, add in a new item, label it whatever you want, and add in the quantity, add in the price. You'll see it changes the total to 500 here, and it added an additional 500 here. This gives us a really clean interface to enter this type of data. And now you may be wondering, how do I add additional invoices? If I click, at least within this record review interface, click this left side panel, scroll down to the bottom, and we can add records through a form. If I click this cog icon, we can edit the form. And here we can add new record. I'll go back into preview mode. If we want to add another invoice, you can add in the data here or just hit create. And then we can come in and add in our records, add in our new line item, and it adds in the total and sums it up for us within this interface. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for more tutorials in the future.